Right, hello everybody. Thank you very much for coming to our talk about the meetings of the future. I'm Harvey Jones. I've been with Atlassian for about 4 years, looking after our global collaboration strategy and deployments. I also get very heavily involved in our real estate projects. We seem to have a lot of those, so it's a good opportunity to iterate on our AV strategy particularly. So I'll be talking about, I guess, the past, the present, and the future of our journey with AV and more recently with Zoom in particular. So a little bit of an overview of Atlassian, just for those of you who may not have heard of Atlassian. Sometimes people have heard of our products and not necessarily the brand, but we've got about 4,000 permanent staff now, 13 offices in 7 different countries around the world, over 150,000 customers. And sort of relevant to the theme for this event, we've got our software on 2 different planets with the Mars rover using Bamboo. I'm about to show you just a short video. It'll just give you an overview of our product portfolio and also a little bit of information about our Ship It innovation competition, which you'll see the relevance of afterwards. So let's play this.
Working with people in different geographies, it's exciting. You get lots of different perspectives. We need this for innovation. Diversity of thought leads to better outcomes. If we want to have the best discussions, let's get a broader perspective and let's solve this problem together and be open about the challenges that we face.
There's always something going on in an Atlassian office.
Like once a week, we have our global town halls where all our offices link up from around the world and it feels like we're all in the same room together.
Atlassian runs a lot of events, and one of them is Ship It, a 24-hour hackathon that is unique to Atlassian. It is a place to go take any idea that you really have wanted to work on and make that change and be the change you seek.
Atlassian's a whole bunch more than Jira. There's Confluence, there's Trello, there's
Bitbucket,
Fisheye, Crucible,
Status Page.
oh, Optini, that's new.
Bamboo, Marketplace. Really, they're all just tools for achieving the mission, which is helping people work better.
So it was all about our mission to unleash the potential of every team. That Ship It competition that he referenced there, that's a thing we hold every quarter. And it's an opportunity for Atlassians to come up with bright ideas. It doesn't necessarily have to be related to the product. It can be anything that they think will make not just Atlassian better, but the world better. Get quite a bit of free rein. And shortly after, and what happens is you present your projects to other Atlassians and they get to upvote the projects that they resonate with best, and then the one that gets the most votes ends up winning the competition. So not long after I joined Atlassian, I embarked on this journey, which I'm about to tell you about how we improve our meetings environment. And we came up with this Ship It idea where we actually ended up working with, at the time we were Blue Jeans customers, and we were using a meeting scheduler product called Event Board. And we teamed up with those 2 vendors and we came up with a one-start meeting solution, which was quite foreign to our staff at the time. They were in the habit of wasting that sort of 5 to 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning of every meeting without the one-touch start. And we produced this one-touch start solution, and everybody just absolutely loved it. And we ended up winning the competition that quarter. So that was sort of set the tone for what we needed to do. We realized that we had a lot to do to improve our meeting experience, and we sort of embarked on that journey. So there's not many. Is there anyone here who gets to the end of the week and thinks, that was easy, I got everything I wanted to do done, chill out, no problem, next week will be a breeze as well? No, didn't think so. Increasingly, we're all time poor. We really need to make the best use of our time. So the last thing you want to do is muck around with technology and waste all that time, particularly when it's maybe a large meeting. You've got lots of people involved. All of those people, you're wasting 10 or 15 minutes of those people's time, or maybe you have a whole hour that's an unproductive meeting. Lots of people involved. Over the course of a year, an hour a week of unproductive meetings is weeks of your time wasted. So we really got to make sure that our meetings count and they really deliver on what we're trying to achieve. We've had some fantastic innovations from Zoom over the last 2 days, things that will make our meetings easier. Things like the live transcription service, being able to get interpreters involved in your meetings, all that cool stuff. But more broadly, what else can we do to make sure that our meetings are effective? So we took a bit of a step back and we had a look and we thought, well, we really got to understand how the teams want to collaborate, not necessarily how they're collaborating now, but how do they want to collaborate in the future? Like, where would we need to get to really be serving our teams properly? So we need to build a pretty detailed understanding of their current pain points, and then we need to design a solution and space that works for them and works for those ways that they want to collaborate. So we took a look at what our landscape looked like at that time, and as you can see from all those different colors there, we had a lot of different solutions in place. So across the top there, we've got all the different meeting scenarios. So those are the types of meetings that people were holding. Obviously, it was probably more than those if you really think about it, but those are broadly all the different meeting categories people were holding. And then the middle line there is the bridge they were using to perform those VC calls, and at the bottom, the endpoint technology that they were using to connect to that bridge. So it was pretty mixed. So depending on the type of meeting people were having, they had to decide on which bridge to use and potentially even which endpoint to use. And it was a confusing landscape, and that was contributing to that issue that people were having at the beginning of their meetings. So we didn't really have a tool, or we hadn't implemented any of the tools in such a way that one of them was very pervasive across all those use cases and made sense and really resonated with the users. So there's sort of four main components to that improvement project. I've talked about understanding the user experience. We use surveys, interviews, that sort of thing to understand their pain points. We actually do those surveys annually, and then also after we build a new building, we do a post-occupancy survey to see what people think of every aspect of the experience they have in those new spaces. We also used a journey map, which I'll talk about in a minute. That's one of the things from the Atlassian playbook. We analyzed the space usage. We were quite fortunate. We just rolled out a room scheduler tool, and that gave us really great analytics on which rooms were popular and which rooms weren't so popular, how much the rooms are being utilized. Also gave us how many people weren't turning up for their meetings, that sort of thing. So you can get some really useful data about your space from some of the new meeting room scheduling products, and Zoom are enhancing their schedule all the time, and hopefully analytics is the next thing coming to that product. So one of the interesting insights we got from this was that our large rooms were really popular and the smaller rooms were less popular. And the obvious conclusion there was that large rooms all had video conferencing equipment. About 48% of our total room count had video conferencing equipment. None of the small rooms had any VC. And at that time, our chosen solution was really expensive, so we couldn't really afford to put it in much more than the 48% of rooms we had it in. Or we might have been able to afford it, but it would have been extravagant. So we didn't, and therefore the large rooms were disproportionately popular. People were, if they were using the small rooms for VC, they were using their laptops and maybe not getting such a great experience. We'll talk about that in a minute too. So we needed to understand the technology usage that was part of that thing. We could see that people were predominantly gravitating towards those meetings because they liked to use the video conferencing rather than holding a VC on their laptop. And we also sort of thought about, well, what would our architectural priorities be when we go and select a solution? What's important about that solution? What will make it most easy to support, easy to deploy, easy to upgrade, easy to change if we don't like it or something better comes onto the market? We needed to make sure that whatever solution, if we chose a cloud solution, it needed to have points of presence that matched our office locations. And we needed to have support for any device, including what was then our chosen endpoint, the life-size endpoints. Now, this slide I borrowed from a colleague. He's a work futurist at Atlassian, or our work futurist. His name is Dom Price. His job's pretty cool. He travels the world talking at conferences like this about the future of work. So I thought I'd better pick his mind on the future of meetings. And he shared this slide with me. This is a slide that he often refers to in the context of every company now being a software company and what an opportunity that represents for Atlassian and our products, and also for a lot of our customers who use our products to write software. So, increasingly we've got partnerships with other companies, so that changes the way you. So, when I saw this slide, I immediately thought, well, how's this relevant to meetings? And almost everything here is really relevant to meetings and the way we meet. We now have partnerships with externals. That means we need to meet outside the company. And we need to be able to find an efficient way of bringing those people into our working environment. The pace of disruption, things are moving really quickly. That always on, we've heard about that in a few of the sessions I've been to today, where people aren't necessarily just doing a 9-to-5 job from one location anymore. They might be working hours of the day that either suit them or suit their customers or suit the time zones they need to work in, and they need to be able to work from anywhere. Your customer expectations, those are really moving along very quickly as well. They expect that instant response. They expect things to happen quickly, and that pace of innovation. So that's there's competition coming in from left, right, and center, and you need to make sure you're on top of all those things. I added something to Dom's slide here. I added corporate social responsibility. So we're hearing a lot more about this now. There's the Renewable Energy 100 initiative that Atlassian signed up to. There's the UN initiative, science-based targets for carbon reduction. Those sort of things are going to become more and more prevalent, and they're going to be putting pressure on us as businesses to find more efficient ways of doing things with a lower carbon footprint. So that will impact the way we may have met and traveled in the old days, and we're going to have to look at ways of potentially meeting remotely. Of course, you've got the whole, we've talked about the war for talent, and when you want to attract the best talent, you're going to have people who choose to work from wherever they want to work, and if you want to leverage their skills, you need to find ways of accommodating that. So all of those things are sort of the pressures that we're now finding. That's how our workplaces are evolving, and those are the things that have changed that we need to now design our spaces and our technology to suit. So I mentioned that journey map that we used to sort of analyze the user experience and understand where their pain points were. This is one of the plays in the Atlassian playbook. That's freely available on our website, actually, using that URL, and I highly recommend it. We use it for health monitors and journey maps like this, retrospectives, that sort of things, like quite a lot of the sort of things you might do in an agile workplace. But I found this journey map particularly useful for building empathy with our customers and figuring out where we wanted to target our efforts. So this is this graph represents the user sentiment as they were going through the in-room meeting experience as it existed at the time. So you might decide, okay, the best way to resolve this is to have a video conference. So you go and you look for a video conferencing room. Damn it, can't find one. They're all fully booked at the time we want to meet. So eventually you compromise and you decide to meet at a different time, and your sentiment goes up a bit, and now you're sweet, you've got a room. So you turn up to the room ready for your meeting. It's occupied. Have to wait for these guys to wrap up. Another feature request for Zoom, if we could have a timer on the Zoom controller in the room, that might be quite a good prompt for people to wrap up the meetings. And then you eventually kick them out, and you sit down in the room, all ready to meet. There's no one touch. Well, certainly there wasn't when we did this. There's no one touch to start. And then you've got to figure out all the different parameters of how you're going to join this meeting. How are you actually going to dial this device into this meeting? Which bridge are you going to use? All that sort of rubbish. So eventually you get in, and now you're in your meeting. But is your equipment optimized for the room? Can you see everyone? Have you got a wide enough angle on your camera? Does the dongle fit your laptop? Is the dongle broken? All that stuff that I'm sure anyone who's worked in an office for a little while is familiar with and painfully familiar with. And then eventually you get in, you're all connected and you start being productive, but that might be 10 or 15 minutes after you hoped to be. So we found this really useful. We then decided, well, how would we address particularly those red and those yellow lines? How would we level that off and make sure that experience from end to end was a bit more acceptable? So we thought about, well, we did a bit of a brainstorm. We could have more VC rooms. We could cancel no-show bookings so that VC rooms that actually weren't being used got freed up. We could put meeting timers in the rooms. We could sort of try and push a bit of an etiquette, meeting etiquette out amongst the staff as a cultural change. And then that VC, the one-touch start for VC, I can't tell you what a difference that makes. That really, like, that's where you can see that was one of the steepest red lines there, and that's where we made probably the biggest impact as a result of that Ship It project. And then, of course, wireless presenting avoids the needs for the dongles. There's a lot of wide-angle cameras available on the market now that weren't necessarily in those days. And we could adopt those to improve that in-room experience and the experience of people on the other end of the remote call. So we sort of realized these were our goals. We wanted that uncompromised meeting room experience. We wanted to just solve all of those problems we just saw in that journey map. We want to optimize our real estate usage by making sure we didn't have empty rooms sitting around while people were actually struggling to find a room. And we wanted to make sure that anyone who was working remotely, whether that's in a remote office or working from a home location, for example, was fully included. They need to be able to participate in everything that's going on in that room, otherwise they're a second-class citizen. So we didn't want them to feel like they weren't getting the same experience as people who were in the office. And then we didn't want to get locked into something that we couldn't change if the technology changed and different players started becoming more prominent. So the next step we had, as I mentioned earlier, we knew what our architectural goals were. We preferred a software-driven approach, so we preferred a vendor that had always sort of been born in the cloud, perhaps, and come from a software perspective, was mature in the cloud. So I was quite new into the VC space when I did this 4 years ago. I wouldn't necessarily say I got it right, but it's quite interesting to look back in it now in 2019 and see what my perception of the market was at the time in terms of maturity. So the one that really stands out is, I remember even back then, Zoom Rooms made a massive impression on me, and it was clearly, to me, the leader in the software-based room system. And we knew that software-based room systems were potentially going to be the solution to that problem where we only had VC in 48% of our rooms, and we wanted to really raise that number. So so that we ended up sort of focusing on that top left quadrant in terms of what we want to push forward with and test and make a decision on. I mentioned earlier how some people were using laptops in these rooms and running their VC on their laptop. We sort of vaguely considered maybe we could put cameras and peripherals into the room that people could plug into their laptop, but there were a number of reasons why we didn't go down that route. I suppose we may have gone down that route if software-based video conferencing hadn't been coming of age at the time. But you don't want to be Wi-Fi dependent if you can avoid it. Wi-Fi, despite the improvements, you're always going to get slightly worse network conditions via Wi-Fi than you do with Ethernet. When you're using your laptop for a VC, you've also got contention with other apps running on your laptop. Something might suddenly start, antivirus might kick in or whatever, and all of a sudden your video quality might deteriorate. The peripherals on a laptop, and even the peripherals you might attach to the laptop, might not be up to the same sort of standards you would have in a room system, I mean. And just overall, that compromised user experience, bad camera angles, bad lighting, whatever. Despite the cost savings, really wasn't somewhere we really wanted to go if we could avoid it. Versus almost the opposite on the software-based room systems. It's much easier to have more participants in a room, not just the one person in front of the laptop. You've got that lighting and that acoustic environment that's actually designed for a VC call. And there are ways of doing it now much more reasonably. So just a reminder of how that VC landscape looked before. Once we decided on the direction we wanted to go and we realized that software-based room systems were going to work for us, that's where we started. And this is pretty much where we are and where we're sort of getting to now. So quite a big difference in the sort of mix of players that our staff need to sort of be familiar with and deal with when they're planning a meeting of any of those types across the top there. So I think that's made life a lot easier. Existing staff obviously had figured it out over time, but new staff come on board and then they have to learn all these different technologies. Partly as a result of all the evolution that Zoom's done. They've got the Zoom rooms now, they've got the webinars, so you can use the same very familiar user interface to do a lot of these different meeting scenarios. So that's worked very well for us, and I think it's been lifted a big burden from staff trying to figure all that sort of thing out. Now, at Atlassian, we make enormous use of whiteboards. You walk around our office and you just see whiteboards covered in writing and post-it notes and journey maps and all that sort of thing all over the place. It's really remarkable how heavily whiteboards are used. And in fact, in some of our new office spaces, I think we put over 2 meters of whiteboard in per person. So every available piece of wall tends to get covered in whiteboard glass. So the obvious obstacle to that is, well, we talked about remote staff and how we need to make sure they're included and don't feel like second-class citizens. If you're going and writing on a whiteboard, often that's not even in a VC room, and even if it was, how would you give those remote people a good view of what you're doing on the whiteboard, and even more so, how would you let them participate? So that was another big piece of the puzzle for us that we wanted to solve. We've tried a number of options. We were really happy with the Jamboard. That was a very feature-rich experience. Obvious limitation there is that it doesn't integrate with our now chosen VC platform. So it's really good for when you're just standing around together. You might be able to get people to join the jam session from either another Jamboard or from another device in a VC room and talk to them over another VC bridge. But it wasn't tightly integrated with our chosen platform. So although we like it, we haven't pursued it that heavily. Captivo, that's really worked well for us. So we were a BlueJeans customer, we moved to BlueJeans, and Captivo had that integration with BlueJeans, which was very simple to start a shared whiteboard session. So if you haven't seen it, it's actually upstairs in the exhibit hall. Captivo hangs over your whiteboard and captures a view of your whiteboard, and then you can present that into a meeting. So we had that with a simple touch share on our BlueJeans rooms, and just announced yesterday is the equivalent for Zoom and Captivo. So really looking forward to that so that we can actually share those physical whiteboards into a meeting. It's unidirectional, of course, but it's very cost effective, and it is a good way of making sure that other people can at least see what's going on the whiteboard in the room, even if they can't contribute. But of course, Zoom for Touch, that's been really popular for us because it gives you that, it solves the, it's an integration with the video platform of our choice, and it also gives us that interactivity. So people on the other end can contribute to that whiteboard session, and you can have a really very collaborative experience. So that's working very well for us, and we've, as we've done some of our more recent office builds that have come or been planned since our migration to Zoom in April, we've been able to start building a lot of Zoom for Touch rooms, sort of designed Zoom for Touch from scratch. That's an example of a room we retrofitted in Sydney. So it's got a big 86-inch touchscreen on the left, Crestron soundbar at the top, and an iPad controller. And that's particularly product managers and trainers and that sort of thing are really appreciating that and getting a lot of value out of it. It was interesting, like when people first saw them, they didn't really realize what was going on. But once you do a bit of training and a bit of demonstrating, and you see the light bulbs coming on in people's heads, and they start realizing, wow, this could be really powerful and really enable them to work well. We've just done some executive rooms in Sydney as well. This is an example of also a two-screen room, touch on the left, non-touch on the right. We've worked very closely with our AV integrated partners, Codatech here in the US and Peace of Mind in Sydney, and we built some really fantastic rooms. They just work so well. The optical quality and the audio quality, we use the Shure ceiling mics in a room like this, really working well for us. This one's in Bangalore. It's actually, I don't think it's officially sanctioned by Zoom, but it's working very well for us. And this is a three-screen room, but the left-hand screen is actually touch. So it was only relatively recently that Zoom started supporting multiple screens with the Zoom for Touch functionality, and we've actually taken it one step further with the three-screen touch. So that gives you a very immersive experience, particularly in a training environment. And what happens quite a lot is our coders, our engineers will sit there with 3 different laptops, and they'll bring stuff up on the 3 screens and compare code and that sort of thing. So it's got some quite useful use cases. And it's quite early days for this, but we are seeing quite a bit of uptake. So I think we've got one of those in about half a dozen rooms at the moment. We're aiming to put a Zoom for Touch into at least one floor in every one of our buildings. And those rooms that don't get a Zoom for Touch, we put Captivo into them, so at least there is a whiteboard sharing solution for those rooms. This is another one of these exec rooms. Also, it's actually brand new. This photograph was taken less than 2 weeks ago. And that's another 3-screen Zoom for Touch room with one of those semicircular tables in front of it, Shure mic in the roof. It's got a combination of a Hudley and a Logitech Rally camera, and I think it's Crestron speakers. And really happy with that result. One thing to watch out for, actually, we put this Casper screen cloaking film on the glass, and that doesn't actually work on most touch screens. In Bangalore, we were able to rotate the angle a little bit. So this is for privacy for anybody who's not familiar with Casper. So if you want to be able to show content on the screen and have a glass wall without people seeing what's on the screen, there is this Casper cloaking technology, but it's very variable about whether it actually works with touch screens. Sometimes you can cloak all the other screens, but not the touch screen, and that's the one the content always goes on, so we'll probably have to find another solution to maintain that privacy. This is quite an interesting use case. So we're in the process of developing a whole new campus in Sydney. It's going to be near the main central train station. I think it was just announced overnight in Sydney that we are moving into this campus in 2024, and the process of planning for it has started. So this guy is Rick. He's the head of our long-term Sydney project. And he was an instant convert to Zoom for Touch. That solution you can see there is actually on a trolley, and there's another camera that's not in the picture on a tripod. And they have these big models in this room, and he actually uses the camera on the tripod to show people on the other end. He changes the angle of the screen on the trolley, and then he takes this tripod around and shows people the models that they're building of the options for the new building. He absolutely raves about it. In fact, he's contributed to a case study that we've done with Zoom. It's, I believe, going to be released quite soon. So that was good to see an example of how it gets put into such practical use. So he marks up plans while he's got architects on the other end. They'll mark something up, and then he'll show them where the relevant thing is in the model with the other camera. And just a good success story. That. So as a result of this sort of journey we've been on, we've now got VC in I would guess it's about 97, 98% of all our rooms. We were able to make some early quick wins on that. We were in the process of upgrading from 24-inch to 27-inch screens for people's desktops. So we had a bunch of 24-inch screens lying around that we didn't know really what to do with, and we said, well, why don't we repurpose those into these software-based room systems? So we were able to, for less than $2,000, we were able to equip $2,000 per room. We were able to equip dozens of rooms with software-based VC and solve all those problems associated with laptop-based VC. So that's really worked very well for us and made that use of rooms much more equal. It means you don't have two people sitting in an 8-person room and wasting that resource while people who need to have an 8-person meeting can't find a room. So we're getting much more even use of our rooms now, and it's working out very well. We've now got that sort of very easy touch-to-join start consistently across all our rooms. Even, in fact, Zoom were very helpful to build the life-size integration for us. They already had it with Cisco and Polycom, but that was one of the obstacles to us adopting Zoom, is we couldn't do one-touch VC start from our life-size schedule until that integration was ready. So that was done actually specifically for us so that we could make the transition, and it's working well. In terms of remote staff being on equal footing, we've talked about the interactive virtual whiteboarding, which really helps with that. We've thought about auto-framing wide-angle cameras. We've got those in now, and the dual screens. So instead of them just being a little box in the top corner of a shared content screen, they're now equivalent size to people in the rooms and feel much more included. So that's working very well for us. Yeah, we're happy with that. This is another slide I borrowed from Dom, as I mentioned earlier, when he talks about the fourth industrial revolution, which we're in now, which is where we've got effectively machines making decisions and talking to each other with AI and coming up with various automated ways of doing things. It's kind of moving us from a traditional work model, and this applies to meetings too, of course, where we've focused on efficiency. It's been a sort of 9-to-5 type workplace where people are expected to go to work and they're expected to try and optimize for efficiency. So his argument is if we were optimizing for being effective, we don't care about a lot of those things we used to care about in the old workforce. We're now optimizing for things like those plays that I mentioned. It's a quick way to identify where you've got a problem in a team. You've got guardrails, so you're just sort of giving people some guidance. You're not giving them a rigid path to follow. Embracing variability. Sometimes it's valuable to have something that's a bit different. You don't want to necessarily go down the same track every time. You don't want to always run your meeting in the same way if there's a different situation that demands a different way of meeting. And I think some of those Zoom technologies we've seen, like the live transcription, the interpretation, taking the automated meeting notes, we can leverage some of those things to make sure that we're not sticking in our traditional way of meeting. We're actually embracing some of the things that technology can bring to us to change the way we meet. And another really good example of that is if someone needs to miss a meeting or or if someone's in another time zone, they can really catch up on what happened in that meeting using that, they can search the transcriptions and they can mark areas. Those meeting actions might be in the transcriptions as a result of some of those new features we've just seen. So I think that all these innovations are helping us be more effective rather than focusing on the sort of traditional focus of efficiency. That's everything I was going to present to you today. So I'm happy to take any questions. Please feel free to walk up to the mic and fire away. Right. There's some microphones up the front here.
Quick question for you.
Sure.
What kind of devices are you using for the touch screen? That's one. And part of the experience of whiteboarding is the physical aspect of, using, sticky notes.
Yes.
How does it work for you now when you're using the virtual whiteboarding?
Sure. So we're using mostly LG touchscreens. We've dabbled with the D10s as well, which you've probably seen around here. And we're also using Dell 27-inch all-in-ones in our small rooms. So every one of our small rooms, and we've been able to do away with the iPad as a result as well, because obviously people can control the meeting on the screen, and then they can also elevate that to an interactive whiteboard session if they want to. So a combination of those two technologies is what we're using for the virtual whiteboarding. And yes, that's the next feature request for Zoom. Can we have a sticky note function, please? Jamboard has it, and we're already seeing Zoom catching up with some of those feature gaps that a player who's been in the market longer, Jamboard has, and Zoom have already got shape recognition, so you can draw little boxes and it'll turn into a nice neat box instead of what might be some scrappy handwriting. And I believe handwriting recognition might be coming at some stage in the future too. So we're hoping that as Zoom do with nearly everything else, they innovate fast and bring us some of those features. Cheers.
Thank you. Can you speak to the use of recordings in the meetings, the recordings and even what happens or patterns in how they're used after they're generated?
Yeah, certainly. So that was something we were surprised how popular it became. And I think it's partly because of our distributed workforce. I talked earlier about how many offices we have and how many time zones we span. So they very regularly get used for including people who might be in a different time zone. So if a team meeting gets held, typically between, say, the US and Australia, the guys in Amsterdam, it's usually the middle of the night for them. So that meeting gets recorded, and then the recording gets shared with the guys in Amsterdam. And they might be interested in only a few important things, and they can then search the transcripts that takes them to that point in the recording where the thing of interest to them is discussed. And we've just heard about more innovations there around action items and meeting notes and that sort of thing that'll also be in those transcripts in future. So I think that'll be very handy. We also use Zoom for our town halls as well. There was a session, I don't know if you attended, specifically about town halls, and that's working well for us. But one of the things we'd like to be able to do is to transmit that town hall to additional screens, and then some of those screens aren't equipped with speakers. But now that you've got the live transcription, you could actually have that on the screen and do away with the need for speakers, so you can put that town hall out more broadly. But yeah, recording's been one of the most popular functions in our environment. Thank you. Cheers.
Hey, so as you transition from having all of those variety of solutions to predominantly Zoom, did you have a baseline of customer sat before and after, and how did you kind of measure that
we did.
success?
And well, interestingly, our customers, so we've got these experience surveys, these surveys we do annually. We haven't got the next batch of results since it was only in April we made the cutover. But we already, when we did the software-based room systems, we saw a massive uplift in people's satisfaction with room availability and the technology in the rooms and all that sort of thing. It was marked, like it was really significant. Blue Jeans, because when we cut over from Blue Jeans to Zoom, there's a different way of measuring CSAT. So Blue Jeans had an out of 5-star rating, and Zoom's got the percentage rating. But I think we sit over 98% CSAT for the Zoom experience, and the in-room experience is a bit low. It's about 83, 84%, and so that's an area we need to focus on a bit and close that.
Were those surveys very specific and targeted towards the room technology and the UC experience, or were they just general technology tools to do your job at the company?
The surveys are about the broader experience of working at the company. So they anything from the facilities to the food to the events. But we do have some very focused technology questions in there as well. We don't really get into the nitty-gritty of whiteboarding and all that sort of thing, but we certainly give people free-form, there's the opportunity to give free-form answers, and we do get some quite pointed feedback in that area. Our staff are not shy to tell us what they want and what they need, and we get some very direct feedback. And not just in the surveys. We get it on the blog pages. We use Confluence as our internal blog, so our internal intranet, and we often blog whenever there's some new innovation or something changing. We blog about it, and then we get direct feedback on the page as people familiarize themselves with the technology. So we have quite a lot of feedback.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Two questions. First, any plans to use Zoom Phone?
Yes, so we're unfortunately currently locked into a contract with another cloud provider, but we certainly are looking at that as an opportunity, and we really like what we've heard so far about it. So, again, as we see the market evolving, we reevaluate these things periodically, and I think we'll definitely be taking a hard look at that.
Okay. And then the second, you mentioned corporate social responsibility.
Yeah.
Anything specific from like a reduction in travel or greenhouse gas emissions? I know your founders are big into that. So yeah. Any big goals that how this video conferencing kind of fits into that?
Not specifically, but we do have, we've committed to the Renewable Energy 100 initiative, which by 2024, we have committed to be 100% offsets, I think it is. 100% renewable energy. So all the energy we consume will be renewable energy. And by 2030, we will be 100% carbon neutral. So we have made those two commitments, the latter, the UN, and the former via the RE100 initiative. We haven't entirely figured out how we're going to get there yet, which I think might be part of your question. So, yeah, certainly, all of that stuff is things we're looking very heavily at.
Could you share your decision to go to Zoom Room, given that I know that it's adding another endpoint. However, there are a lot of conferencing solutions out there for conference rooms. What was the research done and the decision going to Zoom Room? And second question is, are you measuring room utilization and data to put all these spaces into best use?
Yes, so we do measure room utilization currently through our event board product, which has very good analytics. So that really does give us some quite fine granular comparisons between sites, understanding of how much rooms that don't get checked into, how many of them actually get reused. So we get some really good data on that. So that's the main source of our analytics at the moment. There's a few gaps, like we're not sure which are VC meetings and which ones are not, for example. We're not sure how many meetings might be happening outside of, in shared spaces that aren't bookable. So there's a few gaps we need to close, and we're looking at opportunities to close those. But in terms of the decision to go SVC, software-based video conferencing, that was a bit of a no-brainer for us when we realized the utilization discrepancies for our rooms, and we realized that there was such a cost-effective solution out there with the software-based video conferencing. But we have iterated through various hardware standards. We've made a few mistakes along the line, and we progressively correcting those. So because we've got a lot of real estate projects on the go, we do get quite a good opportunity to iterate on those as we go. And we've made a few missteps, but nothing that wasn't easily fixed because the rooms are quite cost-effective to begin with. Sure. Good. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate you coming.